So you mentioned that Obama used to be very disturbingly silent, taking notes, but after he met Jesse Jackson and Jeremiah, he seemed to absorb something that transformed his style. So what was that kind of tutelage? What quality Obama himself possessed to transform himself into an oratorial genius? And especially what happened in 2004, the DNC keynote address.
Great question.
Yeah. It is a hard learning experience for him, and it does take that 4 years. And he spends an awful lot of time practicing that 2004 speech. But one thing that is important to me in chapter 9 of this book, the person who gives the most editorial impact, the most editorial input for that speech has never gotten any credit at all previously for it. John Cooper, Kupper, David Axelrod's former partner. And Cooper is a great example of the old-fashioned virtue of history, because Cooper, still had this box. Cooper, like me, is a sort of person who, if you got a substantive email, you send me a substantive email, I print it out and get my, red pen or my yellow highlighter. So John, this is 4 years ago now, John had this big box, 2 big boxes actually, of all the campaign documents and most of the email traffic from the U.S. Senate campaign in 03-04, including probably 31 slightly different iterations of that speech. Now, I don't spend a whole lot of time about word changes in different drafts of that speech, even in a book this size. But somebody writing their, master's thesis in, rhetoric or speech communication, could have great fun going to town on all of Cooper's alterations in that speech text. Now, does it make a substantive difference in the content of the message? No. And then there's a lot of complicated internecine tussling with John Kerry's campaign staff because they like some of the lines so much that they want to steal them from Barack and put them in Kerry's speech. But once Barack goes up on television in February of 04, they save all their money for like that last 6 weeks.
That's right.
And you got folks, you got African-American folks on the campaign saying, we need billboards.
That was Jesse Jr. Billboards on Dan Ryan.
Yep. But that Sheila Simon spot, where Sheila's talking about, that Barack is cut from the same cloth as her then very recently deceased dad, former Senator Paul Simon. It's when those ads start running and Barack realizes he's now, for the first time, a public person whom folks are recognizing. There's this real transformation in his realization from sort of February through August, September of 04, that he is now this public persona. Cass has a great line, I forget exactly when, about catching Barack smoking down on like Lower Wacker on the Trib building.
Oh, David tells you that too. Didn't David Smallwood tell you? He caught him
Yep.
Walgreens.
Yep. And Cass is right. He realized this was the last time he would ever see Barack Obama alone, without an entourage.
So your question is a great question. Black Baptist ministers tell stories. Their oratory is storytelling. The great ones tell stories from the Bible to present to Bible. and they can go back and forth via example with narrative. I think there was an incident, I guess this is maybe the way to explain it. David, I don't know if I shared this with you. Black Melody Span owns WVON and Indigo, and we were probably at, Indigo was definitely probably at its height. There were others in black media who were anti-Barack. And they were saying things like Barack was not black enough.
Right.
Barack did not have a black agenda. Barack was not speaking to black issues. Melody pulled all of those folk together and said, let's have a meeting and let's talk about it. And we did. Now, I don't know if that was done at Barack's request or not. We went to a restaurant and closed it, and we had a meeting. Reverend Jackson came to the meeting. I don't know how he found out about it, but he came. And we were saying, we have to stick together. You know, yes, he's different. We can't say he's not of the civil rights movement. He was 6 years old. He couldn't have been of the civil rights movement. So don't beat him up with that. That's kind of weak. He's different. And he is different. And it's okay. They thought I was going to be the outrageous one, and I wasn't. I was trying to be the voice of reasoning and like, this is generational, it's okay. He's not a Chicagoan, it's okay. He was not in the Harold Washington movement. That's hallmark in Chicago. If you did not come from King, okay, but then if you didn't come from Harold, you know, like you're a bad guy. And that was okay. He was from New York, okay. Hawaii, okay. And we kept going back and forth on Barack, and it was tear him down, build him up, tear him down, build him up. He ran against Bobby. How could he run against Bobby Rush? That was so bad. All right, he learned his lesson. We were going back and forth. I was like, hey guys, let's let him fly. He's different and he sees something maybe that the civil rights people didn't. He sees something that maybe we had to get to Harold. So this is next step. But let's let him fly. Let him fly. Melody picks up a chair. And Melody has hit somebody in the head with the chair who was disagreeing. And I was like, oh God, we're in here fighting. I mean, we got physical. Wouldn't let Jesse talk. Jesse started talking, and we said, shut up, you don't have anything to say, be quiet. And we were fighting. And I said, if you all write one more negative thing about Barack, I am going to write about you in Indigo, and I'm going to kill you. And we're going to go on BON every single day, and she's going to kill you, and we're going to hurt you.
Yeah, I'm not going to get the name of some of these papers. South Street Journal,
What's
Citizen.
Lorenzo Martin. South Suburban News.
All right.
The Citizen.
Citizen, yeah. A guy named Ron Carter, is that a right name?
No, Ron Carter is South Suburban News.
Okay.
The Citizen.
Yep.
Who else? But I mean, Windy City.
Windy City.
What's Mary Montgomery? Windy City News. There's West Side.
She had the West Side Times.
West Side Times.
Right, okay.
So that was our argument. And then we came out of that, and Melody and I said, you know, we gotta, Barack is not tough. Barack is mentally tough. But Barack is not community organized and rough and tough.
That's an excellent point. He was a
gentle,
real difficult time with confrontation.
Yes, yeah, no.
Professorial.
Yeah, that's a good.
Didn't
Yeah.
like confrontation.
He couldn't turn it on and turn
He
it off.
couldn't turn it on and turn it off. And when you're on the street, if you're doing community organizing, you're knocking on doors. One guy is nice and welcoming and come on in, have some coffee.
Next guy wasn't
And the
good.
next guy is like, get away from this door. What are you doing knocking on my door? I don't want to hear that stuff. And, my guy is Susie, and I don't want to hear about Barack. What kind of name is that? I mean, and it goes on. And I mean, you have to get a toughness. I mean, I've been in rooms where I was like, Barack, sit down, be quiet. I got this. Let me handle this for you. And I did the rough and tough. And it's like, you all be quiet. Let's listen to this guy. We went through that, but they kept beating him up on he was not black enough.
Right.
What they were saying is he was not, and this is where I've come to conclude. Barack was not a race man.
Right.
In black culture, there's a whole literature that talks about being a race person. So Du Bois was a race person. Dr. King was a race person. As you saw the world through a lens of race, and then the world went out from that point of view. Barack did not see the world like that.
Yeah.
Barack has a universal approach to the world, and he had to learn how to be black. He had to learn Chicago politics. He had to learn Chicago black, South Side politics. It's a little different. But he's not confrontational. He's not rough and tough. And if you shout at him, he might put his head down rather than punch back.
Paul Williams is a great voice on this difference.
Okay.
Former state rep.
And Paul was, well, I'll give you another example. In Springfield, you remember this, there was legislation, Emil Jones wanted Barack to introduce legislation. He needed his name on something. And Ricky Hinton.
Oh, the fight with Ricky, that's in the
Trump.
book. Oh, yeah, that's.
They had been working on, what was that legislation? It was a key piece of legislation.
Well, part of it is the driving while black
The
stuff.
driving while black, stopping black men on site or something. It was something like that. And Emil took their bill.
He took it from Monique Davis, too.
Gave it to Barack.
Yep.
He combined.
Bill jacking is the Springfield phrase for this.
Is that all of their elements and said,
We did it.
Barack introduce it.
Because this is part of Emil putting
This is
Barack
him.
forward.
He's pushing Barack
Yep.
forward. And if you really look at Barack's legislation, his record, Barack was a lot of times present.
Until Emil starts.
Until Emil, because Emil was like,
Yep.
you're not going to have a record. Present. You can't be present. You got to say something. You got to do something. So he took this bill, and it was Donnie Trotter, Ricky Hinton, and Monique Davis, and he extracted from it.
Right.
And then we made it a Barack bill, and it was like, Barack, you get on the floor. Emil just admired Barack's eloquent speaking. And he says, no, you go and introduce this bill. Well, when they heard it on the floor, they went nuts. It was like, that's not your bill, that's my bill. And and they got like that. What are you doing? Who told you to say that? That's not your bill. You stole our bill. You're lying. Well, he and Ricky get into a fight.
Yeah,
Ricky says, you take that bill and whatever you do, shut it down. But anyway, they go outside and they start taking off jackets and they're getting ready to get into a fight, a real physical altercation. And Emil comes and he has to protect Barack because Ricky getting ready to kill him. And then Donnie's getting ready to kill him. Then Monique comes out. They're just going to kill him. And Emil actually had to get in it and say, and protect him and say, no, you all have to share your bills and, kind of be nice. And this is a great guy. And I'm going to make sure the bill gets through. And it should be important that the bill get through, not who signs it. And they were like, well, if it's not important who signs it, what the hell is Barack doing with it?
Yep.
He didn't do it.
Yep.
And that's a good
It's a great long story that's in there. Yesterday afternoon, I did an hour on the radio with Ben Jarabsky from the Chicago Reader, who's now got a radio show on WCPT, and Ben touched on this. And I believe this Monday, I had not had time to say this to Hermene in email. This Monday, Ben is going to have Ricky on to read that section of my book and react to it. And you know, Senator Hendon is,
He
you know,
still goes bananas when he talks about this. He and Donnie Trotter still go off the wall. And you almost have to separate them from like, okay, guys, calm down. It was a long time ago. And they would say, Barack stole bills. And then, but what Emil was trying to do was to establish him as a lawmaker.
Yep.
That's really
Yep.
what he was trying to do. And so everything had to come through Emil. So when he saw something, it's like, oh, this is for my guy. I'm going to give this one to Barack. It was Barack who would go on the floor, introduce it, present it, speak to it, da-da-da, and, you know, do the lavish thing. But Barack is not a confrontational, rough and tough. South Side, Chicago, black folk politics, if you don't know how to fight, if you don't have some grit in you, God bless you. When I've been with, on the West Side, they just tear down. I mean, they're just awful. I don't come over there with y'all. I bring y'all over. You all come to the University of Chicago and we'll meet and have coffee. But when I was, I've been with Reverend Jackson since I was about 17 years old. I was a college student. And I used to raise my hand in meetings. And of course you got ignored. And one day Jesse pulled me, he says, why do you keep raising your hand? Why don't you just get up and say what you gotta say and tell somebody, hey, you're stupid, shut up, listen to me, I know what to do. But Barack never, he never got that.
Right.
He never got. I want to tell you one more thing, and this is important, I think, to note. I think you put this in the book. Jeremiah, there is no Barack Obama as president if there's no Emil Jones.
yes, yes.
And if there's no Jeremiah Wright.
Yep.
Jeremiah Wright was really a father figure for Barack. That's why it's shameful of how that really went down.
Yeah, that statement's in the book, but your name, you're described as, there's a characterization of you. That quote's in there, but your name, I didn't put your name right on it.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Did you save me?
Yeah, that's why I always, more than I saved Phil on a few things.
I can go on the west side. But the sermon, and I've heard Barack has told this is where I get this from, the audacity of hope.
Yep.
That was a Jeremiah Wright sermon. And Barack cried when Jeremiah gave that sermon. What the sermon says is, God has blessed us all with something. Life is about finding what that something is. And the challenge is for you to rise to it, to be it. And it's the audacity of your hope. It's your own personal audacity to be all that you can be, all that you will be. Will you do what you need to do to be what God has for you? Barack cried when he heard that, and he stood up in church and cried. That had great impetus for him to be. Now keep in mind, this is Bobby Rush beat down. This is black folks saying to Barack, you ain't black. This is somebody saying to him, you didn't speak very well. You're so middle of the road until you're not saying anything. That was a real challenge for him. It was a turnaround. Yep, that was a turnaround.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. That was a long answer.